Hello and welcome to Next 2.0 on WQLN PBS NPR. Next is produced by Republic's Voice Media. I'm your host, Marcus Atkinson. If you get an opportunity, you can go to Facebook and like the page. You can also follow us on Instagram at Next 2.0. There you can hear about the show stories and promos about what's coming up next for our community. Today we got two very special guests. We've got the good Dr. Parris Baker.
Bless you, man. Bless
Welcome
you.
to the show.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got Pastor Tyrone Clark. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right. And so this is a special topic today. We want to talk about Larry Meredith. And he is a giant in community who, has several accomplishments to his name, and that we want our brothers to unpack today. There's a lot of celebration coming up in his honor soon. And so we wanted to bring attention to him and give him the flowers that he so justly deserves. And hopefully you get an opportunity to not just get educated on this brother, but to come out and pay homage to him in various ways as well alongside of the community. And so we'll start with Dr. Baker. Dr. Baker, if you want to talk a little bit about what's going on with these events. Well, actually, let's start with who this man was.
Well, that might be better to have Pastor Clark talk about who he was and is, because he grew up with him. And I was introduced to him in my adolescence, and he became a hero. So let's start with Dr. Clark, and I'll pick it up as he moves forward.
All right, Brother Clark, talk to us about
Yes, sir. Well, again, thank you so much for having us. And we are really blessed to be able to speak on the life and times of such a robust figure as Larry Meredith. Attorney Meredith, as we came to know him because of his accomplishments and the field of endeavor which he pursued in life, is a multifaceted character. And I, as I already said, I knew him, I guess, from my earliest remembrance or memories. I can recall Larry Meredith in a relationship with him. In fact, our families have a deep relationship. They are three-generational. Larry's grandfather and my grandfather were both ministers. His grandfather, the late pastor Howard Dunbar, is in the church that he helped to develop, was sent to develop by the Lord. It still exists today. And some of the family members still go there. So my grandfather, also a minister in the city of Erie, those two gentlemen were close. And then Larry's mother, who most people know as a great songster, Odessa Meredith, what a powerful woman of God she was. And my mother and my father, of course, was close to her. They formed a group, a singing group called the Clarkettes, and they toured the region. Yeah, well, my dad, Bishop Clark, he's got to make sure that that he gets his own brand in there. But the real star of that group was Odessa Meredith. Mm-hmm. She had a voice and a talent like none other. Mm-hmm. So it's no strange thing that Larry, my family, and his family come to know each other very well in an intimate way. As I said from the very beginning, I knew Larry as a young man in our community. We grew up in a place that is familiar to many people, called Roger Young Park. Roger Young area is where they now are doing a lot of development, but back then they were housing projects, and so this great attorney, this robust and austere man, grew up in a housing project. And there's something about him. I bring that out because there's something about him as he became more dynamic in his work. He never left where he came from. It was all part. His roots were always part of his work.
You mentioned his work. He was an attorney.
He was an attorney, and I say he was an attorney, but as I said, there's so many facets to what he did. Mm-hmm. He grew up in the church, and a large part of his activity remained within the church. And when operating outside the church, the things that he learned, the principles of doctrine, the basic character traits that he gained while in the church and from the church, he continued to practice throughout his life. And you saw it manifest in how he not only managed his business of law and practicing law, but how he dealt with people every day. Mm-hmm. And so I grew to know him as a man of God, a person of God, child of God. I grew to know him as an attorney par excellence, and I grew to know him as a just community citizen that didn't mind getting in the weeds and didn't forget where he came from. That's kind of like an overview of who Larry was.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that excited me about the prospect of doing this show today, because I think that what we don't do enough, and I don't think it's just indicative of Erie, I think we have a tendency of not necessarily letting people know who's around us in that moment. Now, in the African American community, I think that a lot of people are very aware of the legacy of Mr. Meredith. But at the same time, for all that he's accomplished, you would want people in Greater Erie, because he's a part of Erie history, right?
Right.
In Greater Erie to recognize and understand. And so I'm excited about just the idea of helping people come to a better understanding of the impact. Dr. Baker, let's go to you. Talk a little bit about Brother Meredith and his impact here, what that's meant, and what even leads you to come here to have this discussion about his legacy.
Well, as a developing African-American young man, like most of us, we need heroes. And one of the things I struggled with during the 60s is we had heroes like Malcolm X, like Martin Luther King, but they were far away from us.
Right.
Larry Meredith became a local hero. He was doing something where he was much more tangible. I could touch him. Like, he's from the hood. I'm like him. He's like me. And so in the Upward Bound program at Gannon, when we discovered we got a brother going to Howard University, and he's going to be a lawyer like Thurgood Marshall, and all the icons that we read about and thought about, but they were way out there. We said, we got someone right here that we can touch. And for me, as an Upward Bound student, hadn't figured out what I wanted to do, who I wanted to be. It made education much more relevant, pursuing social justice and the issues related to civil rights much more attainable, because I could point to someone and say, he's doing it. And so for me, he became a hero. Larry was at one time I thought he went to Georgetown. If I say Georgetown accidentally, he went to Howard, but I keep thinking it's Georgetown.
So we've got that in common with our presidential candidate.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a capital part of the Divine Nine, a whole bit. But there's a quote from Thurgood Marshall about how he ascended, and the idea, like, I'm Thurgood Marshall, but make no mistake about it, I didn't get here by myself. Mm-hmm. And so I have our obligation to reach back and pull up people that are behind me. And to me, that was Larry. Very quiet in one sense, but very focused and very determined about what he wanted to accomplish. And so he became a hero. And then when he became the first African American on city council, that just raised his esteem for all of us in my cohort, because like he's doing it nationally at Howard University, but he came home and now look what he's doing. He's changing the landscape of who we are and what we think we could be. And so you can see I'm just beaming because he was important to me. Not necessarily physically, like we weren't running buddies or anything like that, but the seed was planted. And that developed. And so that's kind of what's driving me here.
Well, so this question is for either one of you. When you think about a place like DC or Washington,
right,
and you think about an environment like Howard University, obviously that is very different than Erie,
right,
in many, many ways. And so he comes back, he becomes the first African-American city councilman. To the best of your ability, can you say how you think that experience at Howard kind of shaped his worldview? How did it change him? And what do you think he brought back with him to Erie from that experience?
I can tell you from the days of P-Funk, he brought back Chocolate City. Okay. Now I'm being so real, because in Erie, which at one point, our population is, I think at that particular time might have been 10 or 12%. You go to DC and it's 70% African American. Yeah. So there's a different orientation to what you see, how you see it, and what you think you can do, what you know you can do. So to bring that back and to say, although this is a conservative, white, middle-class town, there is a place, an access point, whether it's legal or economic, you can make a difference. And so to have that come back and have that attitude shift, amazing. Yeah.
Because it's a part of the public discourse now. Then I go to Pastor Clark. It's a part of the public discourse now. But just the impact of HBCUs on not just the African American community, but the greater community is now starting to be appreciated more.
Right.
But make no mistake about it, for the listener, if you've never experienced that culture, it is a different culture than what you see here.
Absolutely.
And if you interact with it, let alone being immersed in it, you are forever changed.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where the question comes from, Pastor Clark.
You're so very right about that. The cultural differences is just of great magnitude. And what's important for us, I think, in this conversation is when Attorney Meredith, Larry Meredith at the time, went off to school, Howard University, and he gained this sense of ethnically who he was, ethnically, and down there you get a new sense of blackness because of all the things you talked about. At the time he left, the population of City of Erie was around 135 to 140,000 people. When he came back, we started to see outward migration of people from the city of Erie to the county, and from the county to outside of the region. And so he came back to a city that was a GE, which was our major employer, a decrease in amount of employees. Hammer Mill contemplating whether they were going to stay here, right? And Bucyrus, Erie, and Zurn, and Lower, and all those all decreased. He came back to that, what that does, and it's a conversation we should have about how we look at things today in terms of our race and ethnicity. What that does, it says, how does a black man with all his prowess and with all his dynamic education, how does he work with a city that are dealing with a populace that's trying to fight to keep what they have, because they see that outward migration of talent and education and everything else, right? Now he has to come back to that. Now he has to deal with it different from where he dealt with it when he left here. Right? When he left here, you had your mom and my dad and your dad were fighting to get us into positions. We were happy to get in positions of manufacturing and everything. He comes back to a place with this type of education. It's a different dynamic altogether. Absolutely. That shaped the way Larry approached his work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It shaped it. He could have come back and said, "Look, I've got this new sense of blackness, and I could be the Colin Kaepernick of the day, and say I'm going to take a knee, and I'm not going to do anything other than what I want to do." He could have done that, but he was a man that said, "Look, I got to be wise in every step I make," and so he coalesced with people that would help him kind of like get to a place where he wanted to do and enact some of the things that he wanted to do. And that's what I admire. That is heroic in and of itself.
Well, the fact that there was, in the perspective of Larry and folks like Fred Thompson and Gary Moyer, there was this exodus. Like, if you're going to make it, you young and black, you have to go somewhere else. You got to go to Atlanta. You got to go to Chicago. You can't do it here. So to have a brother who's got education and come back and plant himself here, and the mantra or the Marnico, whatever it was, earn, learn, return. Like that. Yeah, you can go, but come back because you have a responsibility to the folks you left. Again, I'm going back to Thurgood Marshall. That really made sense. And for me, though, it's not a direct reason why I stayed. It definitely influenced. Larry, he could have had a practice anywhere. Once you get connected in D.C. at Howard, you got connections. I mean, you go anywhere. Yeah. So come back was like, and so when I got my PhD, like black man in America with a PhD, I can go anywhere. I got a blank check. This idea of, no, you need to come back and return. Now, my family was a major motivation for me coming back and staying. But it's that idea that once you've learned something, you have an obligation to give that back, to plant that in the people. Because you and I both know, all of us know that, the brain drain, our best and brightest African-American youth are flying out of here.
Sure.
Yeah, because they don't see opportunity. And when I was growing up, again, this is another, like, there's nothing wrong with going to GE. There's nothing wrong with working in the industry. But that's all I knew. Like, I was, my career path was GE. Right? My dad did it. I'm coming right behind him. That's Baker's boy. Never thought, like, wow, you could go to college and do something else. Yeah. Like, oh, okay, that's possible. And again, I go back to that's kind of what he brought back from my cohort. Like, we were really impacted by just the notion that we could go to college and be something.
When I'm talking to young people, I'm always trying to impress upon them the fact that being a game changer is a heavy burden to bear.
Absolutely.
And it's so easy to scroll on your phone and do the TikTok dance. And I'm not mad at any of that, and not necessarily think of, because, you know, a lot of them feel that you don't have to, but not think about all of the prices that were paid before you were able to do all of those things. And so as you're talking about Attorney Meredith, I'm thinking to myself, okay, so he comes back from DC. You're describing the environment he comes back to. He is now credentialed. He's been immersed in this culture. And now how do I use that to impact change? And there is a strategic mind that has to be at work in order to navigate that, because you are not only picking the lock of this very heavy door of opportunity, you now got to find some way to prop it open so the other folk can come behind you.
Yes.
Talk about that, because the weight of that, I think we take for granted because of what life is today. Talk about the weight of that and just how he navigated all of that.
Well, you know, real quickly, let's talk about the presumptive Democratic presidential candidate whose mother instilled in her, you will be the first in a lot of things, but make sure you're not the last.
That's the point.
Yeah, that is the point. And so Larry, being the first, made sure that crack. And I got to talk about what it's like to be first. Because I was the first African-American tenure professor at Gagnon. And so when you're first, it's hitting you first. Yeah. And people who are locked in have a resistance to that kind of change, because change means it's going to affect me. And so you see that now in the national landscape with discussion about, oh, she's just a DEI hire. I can't even imagine what Larry endured in 1976.
I'm laughing out of frustration because it's funny. It's so outrageous.
It is outrageous.
But I digress. Go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, that's the point. It's like, what do we have to do to legitimize what we've already done?
Amen.
Yeah. So,
well, isn't it just ironic that we're still talking about that same struggle, those same barriers today that he was dealing with 30 years ago? And I just think that's, use your word, outrageous.
And Mo Trooper, if I'm not mistaken, Mo Trooper is his nephew, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And their Mo Trooper is on city council.
On city council.
Right? And so that door that his uncle did the lock of, it was propped open, and there he sits.
Right.
You know, that alone is a huge testimony.
Absolutely. That's amazing.
Larry had, and I want to make this point, Larry had some people, he was a novice at certain things, and he broke some barriers down, but he had some examples. He had some people that he didn't necessarily think that were heroes to him, but certainly he had some people to look up to. I think this conversation has to make note of that fact. James Wade, who was one of the people that he worked with, looked up to. Ben Wiley, of course, and who didn't, right? Howard and Millie Horton and Reverend Paul Martin. These people kind of shaped his social strata. And how he would go about practicing the law. Reverend Denny, remember him? Ernest, is that right? Yeah. So you know what he expected of the people that came along with him. And Larry was one of them. Bobby Harrison, of course, from JFK, and of course my dad, Bishop Clark, and others, all helped mold Larry. And so that even with his education, even with his community ties, even with his national ties, and the ability to make big money, because he was very, very intelligent, he came back and he aligned himself with people who were not money interested, and they were more community interested, and that kind of shaped him. Because of that, I think he got to a place where he was very comfortable in doing that. And I guess there's an argument as to whether or not he did it so much, was it to his benefit or not to his benefit, because there could be an argument that he gave away much more than he gained, particularly financially. Yeah.
Which is usually something you can say about a lot of great leaders.
There you go.
A lot of respects, at some point, there's a level of comfort that is more than enough to be content with, right? Absolutely. And so you lead a life of substance, oftentimes something has to be sacrificed. There's a balance there. Fred Rush always talks to me about that. Find that balance. Pay your bills, but give back to the community. And everybody has to find that balance.
That's right.
And so we are in a season where you are in the process of celebrating his accomplishments. Can we talk about just what led to that? Maybe there were conversations that bubbled to the surface. how long after he left us did these conversations start to happen, and then we can move into the actual events that will be honoring this man.
Yeah. Before we go on, I just want to make one more comment. When we mentioned Mo, right, Mo Troop, or Maurice, respectfully, there is a connection again.
Councilman Maurice.
Maurice, yes, Maurice Troop, and the school. He works at
Erie High.
Erie High. Larry is connected to James Meredith.
Right.
Yes, and that's important. The first African American to go to University of Mississippi.
They're cousins.
Yeah, they're cousins. Yeah, so there was a legacy that needs to be shared.
Right.
And again, the influence that I believe fueled his approach to life, education, and so on and so forth. Now, what happened was, unfortunately, Larry just passed too soon. Like a lot of folks, one day he was here and the next day he wasn't. And so, part of it was I didn't know his sister at all at one point, Anita. And then I was on a thread, and it just, as soon as I read, we need to make sure that his name is not lost. And so there's some things that we need to do, because over time, if you don't memorialize someone, if you don't create the legacy thread, 10 years from now, we might forget who Larry Meredith is. And so I said, I'm on board, jump on board with that. So that was my motivation. Because there's just, again, there's so many things we have not talked about that we kind of leapfrogged over that will be talked about in this event, for different purposes. And one of the things that I didn't know initially, but again, there's at this table, there are 3 pastors at this table, right? The influence of the church, enormous, 3 educated brothers, all that integration, and how you don't have to be one at the exclusion of the other. And that's kind of how I grew up. If you were in church, you couldn't do this. Or if you were doing this, you can't be the church boy or whatever, And so for me, it's really important as we, plan and get ready to have these different events, that people get an opportunity to know the multifaceted Larry Meredith, because you can't capture him and he's the first this, or he's, an attorney that, or whatever. There's just lots of layers to who this man is. And we need to make sure that people not only know that, but don't forget that. Yeah.
Is there conversation ensuing with City Hall to honor the fact that he was that first in some way, shape, or fashion?
Can I speak to
that?
that?
I was going to say.
I had to. There's part of this whole conversation that is tough for me, because I've known him literally all my life. Pastor his sisters and as well, even today, and so anecdotally, my brother took one of Larry's sisters to the prom. Now that probably were fixed by the parents, but
That's eerie for you. Yeah, absolutely.
But this is tough for me. But I had the extreme or the great honor to eulogize Attorney Meredith, and one of the things I was happy to hear that on that day, the mayor of the city of Erie, Mayor Joe Schimber, got up and said that he is dedicated to having a Larry Meredith Day. Dr. Baker, his sister Anita, his sister Carol, Evangelist Troop, they took him up on it. And they made it a mission to make sure that we're going to make that happen and keep that word. Yeah. And so I think that was part of that impetus there.
I mean, that is a worthy thing.
Yes.
I'm glad that you seized on it, because sometimes people say things in a moment, you're like, something, that's a good idea, we're going to write with that and make sure that that's honored. But that's something that we need to make sure that people understand what was done in the past and how that impacts our future. I've often said that about, I've heard somebody say that about art in Erie, and it seems like an aside, but I think this matters to some degree in this conversation. When you look around Erie, I was at a meeting one time with Mayor Schimber. We talked about the priorities of Erie. And I said, if I wasn't from Erie, I would think that war was a priority because the only thing memorialized publicly is war.
Isn't that interesting?
We know who Oliver Hazard Perry is. We, all these other things. Every time you turn around, and I'm not mad at those images, but what about the Larry Meredith? What about the Sister Joan Chittister? People that have kind of lent to the soul of Erie. How are we memorializing those people? And I think it is a good rhythm to get into. As a community, it says that this impact matters, right?
Yes. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
With this wonderful podcast, you have a voice for the community and to the community. Do you think there is more of a need for us to highlight and bring to the forefront some of these great members that come up in our community, like Attorney Meredith, like your mom and others that really have done something that's monumental? And should we be doing more of that?
I think absolutely. And one of the conversations that I'm constantly a part of is this idea of museum and memorializing, right? So Bishop Jones has his African American Museum. I love that. I know that Bishop Brock is trying to do the same thing, and at the MLK Center, we're in the process of doing the same thing with a lot across the street, just like at the Thomas B. Hagen, Center for Museum. And other places, I think you have to create a space where that's said. And for certain individuals and certain images, like you talked about the Hortons, that were an influence on Brother Meredith. Well, their sons and daughters are still having a huge impact on the community, today. And you could look at Andre and to be the first in his position.
Right.
On county. Those things are significant. And they should not only be mentioned, our children should have just as much opportunity to go and say, hey, I didn't know X, Y, and Z, and it should be woven into the fabric of our educational community. And so say all that to say, absolutely, and it's not done enough. I don't think, I want to say I was probably in my 40s when I really, and I'm 54 now, when I really started to appreciate the amount of living legends that I was among. And all of our youth should have an opportunity to see and say, hey, I didn't know this person was. This person represents this to my journey. This person represents that to my journey. Because as we say in the 100, what they see is what they'll be. And some people don't envision themselves as a Larry Meredith figure because they don't know that there was a Larry Meredith figure.
Exactly.
Right? So the 9-year-old should know, I want to be like Mr. Meredith. Well, if they don't even know him.
That's right.
So this should be a centralized location of some sort that I think people can go and intentionally see. And we're hoping to aggregate these efforts so that can be created. They're certainly giving out money for all kinds of things. They can find money for that.
Yes, and it takes on even a greater relevance or importance when there are other institutions, people trying to erase or diminish the accomplishments of our people, or erase it by taking books out of the schools and libraries and everything. And so I guess what I hear you saying is that we have to be responsible for making those things, bringing them to the forefront.
Absolutely.
And not rely on someone else to do it for us.
Absolutely. And even creating more space like this today to say, this is who this person is, or this is who this person was. So I think it's a relevant point, right? So this conversation starts to happen. And I know he had some social organizations that he was tied to, the Elks, if I'm not mistaken. He was a very large player in the Elks because I think the last person I spoke to was a member of the Elks Club.
The Elks, Masons, he's a Kappa, the fraternity. He was a member of the Erie County Bar Association. And he's done some things at Edinburgh. I don't remember all the things he did when he worked at Edinburgh for a while. But he was on the board of directors at the JFK. Yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of layers to Larry and his commitment to community service.
So this honoring, Mr. Meredith, is this a consortium of different individuals or different groups? And talk about all the people that are involved with this.
My God, there's a lot of people. If so that we don't run out of time, I'm going to talk. I'll get into those individuals because there's a laundry list of folks. And they all make sense when we talk about them. But the thing that's going to happen on August 5th, it's Larry Meredith. That's Larry Meredith Day. There'll be a proclamation. That'll happen at 2:00 in Perry Square.
All right.
Yeah. And And then there's going to be some tributes, and the mayor's going to do a couple things. And then from that, there's going to be a kind of a commemorative march from the Erie County Courthouse to Perry Square.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, just, the idea is like the March for Justice. Excuse me, those kind of things. There'll be prayer and some opening remarks by Pastor Clark. And then later, and by the way, that's going to be called the Poor Man's March. March, yes. And then later that evening, oh, wait a minute, I forgot.
Then at the park.
There's going to be an unveiling of the Larry Meredith bust. Yeah. And that's real important because that's how we're going to make sure that folks in city government, city council, when you walk in, you will get a chance to see and read about who this man was. And so he won't be lost. Yes, absolutely. So there will be a bust, unveiling of that bust. You were going to say something, sir?
No.
Okay. And then later on, there will actually be a program at the JFK at 6:00.
Who was commissioned to do the bust, just as an aside?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a lot of robust activity.
Yes.
I'm excited about the bust at City Hall. I was just about to say that's where it belongs.
Absolutely.
Time you come into chambers.
And there's a second one that will be unveiled at the JFK.
Very nice.
Because of his commitment to youth and to that institution, JFK. There's going to be one there also.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What role did he play within some of the social organizations that you named? He was a Mason. He was an Elk. His Kappa. What role did he play, especially in some of the local ones?
Well, I'm gonna highlight the one I think we already talked about a little bit. The one that had, I think, the most impact, where he got the least compensation, and that is Larry helped so many people with legal issues.
I heard that.
So many people at no charge, or 25% of my legal fee, or what have you. And he just did that over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And so when we say, how much did he sacrifice? I don't think you can calculate how much legal information, advice, representation that he gave away. Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I personalize it a little bit, if you don't mind, Dr. Baker. Mm-hmm. Pastor, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Make it a little bit more personal. You talk about what role did he play in both the community and some of the organizations. He always started out as a follower, but he found himself elevated to a leader. Mm. So I like to think of him as a servant leader. Mm-hmm. And he wouldn't mind leading from behind.
Yes.
And that I kind of like characterize him. But I'll tell you something. Attorney Meredith he passed away just, as Dr. Baker said, kind of unexpectedly, too soon. But he had resigned himself to not practicing on a regular basis law. Mm-hmm. He had resigned himself not getting involved in politics, which he was very much involved in politics on the state and local level. And he resigned himself not to being very much pushing the goals and initiatives of the organizations, the many organizations he had been involved with. He resigned to kind of letting that go. What a lot of people didn't know is that Larry felt that he had fought the good fight, had pretty much finished his course, and he had kept the faith, obviously. 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks before he passed away, he was being he was being requested to come to this weekly community gathering of business leaders and other social leaders. And he didn't want to do it, but he did it. He didn't want to come spend his Saturday mornings, but he did it. Mm-hmm. And he pulled me aside after one of those meetings and he says, "I'm tired." He said, "I'm not feeling good." And he said, "I pulled you aside. I want to talk to you because I know you've been coughing a lot." And he says to me, "I've been doing the same thing. I've been holding my breath in these meetings, but I'm really like, I got a cough and everything." And so I, gave him my quack medical advice, what he should do. And I asked him, "Why then are you here? Mm-hmm. Why are you here?"
Yes.
His answer was, "It's in my blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's in my blood."
Mm-hmm.
The next week, he goes up to the VA hospital. He was a vet. I don't know if we said that.
No. We didn't catch that part.
Yeah, he was a vet. He goes up to the hospital. He gets a diagnosis. It wasn't necessarily the most essential diagnosis he could get.
Yeah.
2 or 3 days later, he found himself back at the hospital, this time not at the VA.
Yeah.
The rest is history.
Mm.
But it was who he is.
Yeah.
He was. And I don't think even though the body was weak, flesh was weak, there was a spirit about him, what he did that, it just drove me.
Yeah.
And he never got paid for those things.
Mm-hmm.
Never. Yeah. I can tell you that.
And I don't think it's hyperbole to say. When you mention that, I think of Dr. King, who was on his way somewhere else, and you had the sanitation workers strike, and he said, "We got to divert. We got to go." Mm-hmm. And in that speech on April 3rd, he talked about the Samaritan and the focus on what happens if I stop. Mm-hmm. And he reversed that and said, what would happen to them if I don't come?
Right.
Yeah. And that's Larry. While I'm personally struggling, what happens if I'm not present? What happens if I'm not there? And so I have to be there to ensure, even if I'm not physically 100%, I still have intellect. I still can hear and I can make suggestions or whatever. I have to be there. And I think, again, I don't think that's hyperbole to kind of put them next to each other.
This is one of the reasons that I have such a profound appreciation for people that are servant leaders in community. Mm-hmm. I think it takes a level of commitment that is taken for granted by the average person. The idea of it was in his blood. He was compelled to do so. Mm-hmm. I mean, watching people that are in that space, because, I feel myself as a junior member or a member of that fraternity, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when I try to explain it to people, like, there's no such thing as not doing the thing you feel called to do.
Right.
There's no, slow down. It's what I wish I could.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, and the world needs people like that. And how many people receive the calling of some sort, mm-hmm. and they go the other way? They try the Jonah thing. I'm gonna dive in the ocean. And no. Sometimes the whale spits them up, sometimes not. But people kind of run from. But there's a level of gratitude mm-hmm. for people who take that step.
Yes.
So I'm glad that City Hall especially is recognizing it. So this will be right in the foyer, right there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you won't miss it. And again, I got a small list because, I think we mentioned them, the Elks and the ladies of Ozell Temple and the Kappas and City Council, County Council, the school board, Patrick Harkins as a representative, the NAACP, the list goes on and on and on. Just lots of folks surrounding. And again, that just speaks to, again, the different layers, how many different institutions or structures did he touch. And so there's a lot of places that wanted to be part of this. And it's going to be an amazing ceremony, at least for me. I can't wait, to just participate in that.
Any members of City Council playing an active role in this that would seem appropriate?
Andre is on the
County Council.
Yeah, on the County Council. And he'll be speaking. He'll have a proclamation of some sort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And of course, his nephew, Maurice.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's...
Well, then again, we have some former City Council persons involved in Mel Witherspoon, of course.
Yes. Oh, major force.
Yeah, they were very
Spoon. Close. Yes, they were. Yeah. And affectionately, by the way, that's not disrespectful. So he's Spoon.
Yes. That's what we know him.
That's how we know him. And if Mel, if you're listening, I got the hands moving because he knows what that means. We're raising the roof.
I got you. Yeah. I love the fact that you mentioned all these organizations that he's involved in, Elks, some of these other groups, because we're at a season right now, speaking of the fact that he's got that educational background in common with our presidential candidate right now, Kamala Harris. Mm-hmm. It's been highlighted and spotlighted on the news, various different news channels, about the impact of this Divine Nine relationship that she had in these social organizations. And so if you can just, for a brief moment, help the listener understand just how profound it is woven into the fabric of our cultural experience in this country, when you think about the social clubs, whether it's the Elks or whether it's being an alpha or a Kappa, what have you, because Dr. King was an alpha.
Right.
His wife was an AKA, right? And so these things go back a long way. It's interesting, very quickly, that the AKAs, were birthed in 1908, and they were talking about on the news. I had to laugh and chuckle. They said that there were so many donors, 1,000+ donors that were donating, $19.08. And then that same donor would turn around and then give 100, 500,000. Right. Why are they giving $19.08 first? And that was their little code for I'm giving to my sister.
Yeah. Yes.
But talk about the impact of these organizations and that impacted Brother Meredith's life so much.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned that, the first clarion call, there was like 43,000 women who came out. And then the brothers, not to be outdone, it was like 53 or 55,000 that came out. And there is something qualitatively different. Now, I love my education from Gannon, from Case, and from Pitt.
It's different.
But I wish I had went to a HBCU. And the reason I say that is just real quickly, I was part of a product of the 70s. Again, going back to when Larry went away to Howard, there was an influx of teachers. Frank Williams, Johnny Johnson, Johnny Harris, and the whole bit. There was a bunch, and they all brought this HBCU orientation to education. You were going to be smart, right? You sit in class, you're going to learn something, or whack, And again, that was foreign to us. Like you sit in class and I sit in the back and slouch and the whole bit. That's not how you come to class. Yeah, you have to be prepared and ready. And it was not only to be ready, the historical context of why it's important to be ready. Okay. And I think we all benefit from that. What I am sad about, and I mean this sincerely, is how our nation separates that. Like our vice president, who I think they make jest of her, calling her by her first name and inappropriately calling her Kamala and the whole bit. Like trying to demean, this woman has paid her dues. And again, that HBCU is influx of just values and commitment and all that. You can't get rid of that. And again, that's part of what Larry brought back to Erie. I'm convinced of that. And I'm talking so much, I actually forgot your original question. So I was searching like I'm just asking, I'm embarrassed. Like, what am I trying to answer? I just go off. I'm sorry.
Well, let me just speak to some of that and what your initial question was. Here, let us put it in this perspective. Let me give you some names that are also enrolled and going to be participating in this activity. Dr. Stacy Hitt, who is a Kappa. Andre Horton, we mentioned, city councilman, first Black city council person on Erie County Council. Angela Ewell McNair, Larry's niece, and Ed Dawson, a businessman, developer around town with the Elks, Ollie Porter. All these people are successful in their individual ventures, and it's because of the roots that Larry established in our community, and they have, as you've been talking about, they have him to look up to. And so when we talk about how to make this day what it should be, something that is momentous and something that we can set a standard that others can follow, and something that we can actually really have a celebration that is worthy of every effort we're making. We're not doing it because we have that relationship with him. We're doing it because there are so many people that are in all these disparate walks of life that want to make it happen. And therefore, I think it's going to be a success.
Take the African American community. I'm sorry, Doctor. Go ahead.
Just real quickly, this is a Dr. Stacy Hitt story that I think it makes the point it needs to be told. Now, there is an icon. You might know him, Alan Poole.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say, he's a mentor to everybody. So Stacy, when he was a ball player at Vincent, got a invitation to AAU in Las Vegas. And he didn't have any money, right? And so Alan got paid on a Friday, went to the bank. This is a true story. Went to the bank, got paid, put the money in his hand and said, make it
There
happen.
you go.
And put the entire check in his hand and said, go make it happen. And now he's Dr. Stacy Hitt. That's the environment that we're talking about, where there are people pouring in, and it wasn't just lip service. It's like, I want you to make it. And so here's some money to do that.
Okay,
Now,
so you're forcing me to add this to it. Of course, Alan Poole went to East High School.
there you go.
As well as Larry. And yeah, so there's a relativity there.
I just think it was an infectious understanding that one makes it, we all make it.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, for the listener, obviously there is a profound impact on the African American community by the presence of and the life and times of Larry Meredith. Make the case for why this is important to Greater Erie. Which is why I'm so excited that Greater Erie is honoring, and that the mayor is spearheading this or coming alongside of this. Why is this important? Because we say, Black history is American history. Make a case for why this is important to Erie.
Okay. Now I got that question. You want to go first? Because I'm gonna be crazy. Why is this important? And now part of I've already said. To have someone that focused come from Erie is a reason why. And I'm very quickly, not only Larry Meredith, you think about like Ada Lawrence, Harry T. Burley, like these incredible folks, Charles Kennedy and Bruce Morton Wright, and a whole bit. I can keep going on and on and on. Like in the Bible says, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? Can any good thing come out of Erie? I grew up hearing that. Yeah. I'm like, no. There's a wealth of folks that have emerged out of Erie, Pennsylvania. And so for that point alone, we should make the case. But then our future, where are we going? We have a mayor, he'll probably be a 3-time mayor, is my guess, who's made a commitment to diversity. And so we should take advantage of that. We have all this intellectual capital here right now. And let's wake up the possibility, or in the guise of President Obama, like, we believe we can. We can, and again, as we said, the 100 black men.
Amen.
If you can see it, you can achieve it. If you believe it. And so just getting people to understand, getting our young people to understand, it is possible. And here are some examples. And they're not that far away from us. Yeah. Now, that's case 2. I'm going to stop because I'll just keep going. Because I want to allow me to do one more. You said you're 54. Yes, you did. And I know that you were born here, raised here, and then you left, and then you came back. Yes, and look what you're doing.
Yes, sir.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I can just point to you and say, here's the case. You're the case. Yeah. But then I can look over here and say, and you're the case, Brother Tyrone. There's the capital around here, human capital, we're so rich. And so, no, just wake up and look around. And not just the African American community. Look around our community. Every part of who we are is valuable. Every part of it. So don't miss it because you're blinded by race or gender or sexual orientation or any of that stuff. So, which is why, like our president, our Democratic presidential nominee. I don't want to go off, but yeah, because it's inclusive. Like, I'm trying to get everybody in the circle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, Pastor Clark, you pointed out the fact that he went east.
Yes, he did.
Right? And so I think that's significant because I know with the work that I've done with the district over the years, it's been one of the things that I think we definitely should get stronger at, because I look at a culture like a cathedral prep, for example, which my daughter just graduated from. It's not disparaging, thinking my son's going to end up there too. But, the way they promote this person is prep within, and they try to give young prep people a sense of pride to be a Rambler. They openly promote, and that is not a negative thing. No. When you look around the school district and you think about the titans of industry here in Erie, and I think about, Wally Knox from the powerful Knox law firm, SV alum, just like I am. Right. Thomas B. Hagen and all of his power, SV alum, just like me. Nick Scott, SV alum, just like me. All of these different people.
That's right.
And so whether it's an African American community in the the greater Erie community, to point out the fact that these people were produced by us, because to your point, Dr. Baker, can anything good come from Nazareth? I'm sick of people saying that about the Erie School District.
Exactly.
We have produced it, but what? We have produced heavyweights in these places.
Absolutely.
And why are we not telling these kids, black,
That's
white,
right.
or others, that all of these titans of industry and community, start naming them.
That's right.
Put them on the walls in the hallway, whatever you want to do. Let kids, this is what you come from. So don't be misled that you got to go to one of these private schools to follow in the footsteps of giants.
Absolutely.
Nothing could be further from the truth. All right. So we talked about the Monday events. The Friday events, we punch home the Friday events. What were the Friday events?
That's at the Sheridan. That's the Kappa event.
That's the Kappa event. Okay,
Yeah.
so that is their fraternity. They're doing something there.
And it's very specific. It's not exclusive to just Kappas. Anyone can come. You pay your fee, you'll get in. But it is a black tie affair.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And again, it really is to enunciate his role. Larry was a lifetime member of the Kappa. In other words, he's paid his dues for his lifetime membership early because he was that committed to the fraternity. And he believed in the values and commitment to that fraternity.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So we're sneaking up on the finish line here in about 5 or so minutes. Pastor Clark, say a little bit about what you want people to consider as we ponder the legacy of our brother and we ponder these events. What do you want to say?
Part of what and who Larry was is he enjoyed being around people. He enjoyed having a good time. There's parts of his life where you can draw attention to the fact.
I remember seeing him dancing.
He could cut a step here and there. So we want people to enjoy themselves and all the events that we're having. Have a good time. Get to know some of the other people that Larry come to know so very well, and kind of come together in fellowship or in just camaraderie. We want to see that happen because that's at the source of who Larry was. Then we want there to be people to walk away with a sense of, you've been talking about, Dr. Baker's been talking about, a sense of history of who we are, sense of ownness, and I think that's important that people learn about who he was and let that translate into a narrative that this is how we can also achieve. We can do the same or even greater. Greater works can we do. And I think for me, I'd like to see that us walk away with that. Yeah.
I think about the diversity on city council even right now as we speak. I mean, to include having a young Latina president. Right. And so, you got Jasmine on there, you've got Dr. Titus on there, you've got Mr. Troop on there, and Witherspoon is still. And so the diversity of city council right now is noteworthy. We still got some work to do on county council. Because certainly Dre is not enough. We need to add another 1 or 2.
My understanding, he's got one more year. He says he's done.
Exactly. So we need to figure that out. We need to figure that out. But I mean, once again, it's that having an appreciation for this is what came from that seed.
Right. Exactly.
Let us not take that for granted.
Yeah, I want to make as we talk about this, if there was one thing I would want people to get from all these events, and the more I did learn about Larry and his spiritual context, the more I think about like spiritual identity. And so, just for a moment, like 30 seconds, if you can remember the story in John, Nicodemus was a smart guy, but there's certain things he didn't understand. So Nick at night, he went to Jesus at night, right? Nick at night. He wanted to find out. He was curious. Yes. And he asked Jesus some really important questions that changed his life. Now, fast forward, because you don't hear anymore. Like what? So he got that information. So, and it kind of fits the narrative with Larry. While we didn't hear about Nicodemus, he was busy. He was still following Jesus. We don't read it in the scripture. But when you get to the cross, who was there? Nicodemus. Nicodemus was right there, and he helped pull his body down. He financed that his whole purchasing of the tomb and the whole bit. So was there an impact? Absolutely. And that's how I see Larry. Is I went away, I got smart, I became not a Pharisee, but got an education. And then I kind of went to work, and you didn't necessarily hear about me, but I was making an impact all over the place. And up until he died, it was right there. And now it's like, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that Nicodemus was not forgotten. That's why I believe he's mentioned in that part of the Bible. And that is our motivation, or my motivation, to make sure his story is not lost. Yeah.
And his, I want to add, and his very intelligent and industrious daughters.
Yes.
That he had. He had all daughters. But they're just a joy, and they're very, very dedicated to their professions and very intelligent, like their dad.
Yeah, and with that, I forgot to mention, there's going to be a Larry Meredith scholarship. Yeah, and the idea is to pour into folks. I'm not sure if it's exclusive to legal work or just promoting children go to school, go to college, but there will be a scholarship in his name developed. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, listen, thank you both so much for coming on and talking about not just these events, but educating us on the legacy of Mr. Meredith. And, you know, Dr. King always talked about those that were able to serve. You didn't have to, you know, have a degree to serve. You don't have to make your verb and your adjectives, however the phrase goes. I don't want to mess up the quote, but the bottom line is anybody can serve.
If you want to be great, you can be great, learn how to serve.
There you go.
Yeah.
And anybody can play that role. And in community, I know we are so stuck on a macro level. Communities are impacted most, I believe, on the local level. I don't care if it's politically, I don't care if it's socially. You know, what's going on in your own backyard is oftentimes way more important than what you're seeing on a national level. And so soldiers like Mr. Meredith are needed and necessary to every community's growth.
Absolutely.
Thank you both for coming in.
Thank you so much.
And just bringing us all the information. Any parting shots before we say goodbye to the audience? Anything we need to consider before we say goodbye to the audience?
If we didn't say the August 5th event, it will be held at the JFK. I don't know that we specifically said that.
I'm glad you said that because I don't know if we caught that part.
Yeah. So it'll be 6 o'clock at the John F. Kennedy Center.
You got it. You got it. All right. Like my daughter would say, all hearts and minds clear.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate you. Thank you so much for giving up your time and giving space for this.
Of course, that's what we do, and that's it for our show today. You can tune in next time for more discussion and analysis with local and national guests. I need you to remember that Next 2.0 streams on Fridays on all major podcast platforms and on the fourth Sunday of the month at 4 p.m. on WQLN PBS NPR, which is 91.3 FM. And also there's a new feature. If you want to leave a message, comment, or suggestion for the show, you can call the next hotline, and that is 814-240-8816. We look forward to hearing from you. Marcus Atkinson, come and join us again to hear about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Peace.